Hello and welcome to the first episode of the podcast More Than Our Sport, a podcast dedicated to sharing the stories and experiences behind the talented women who perform at the elite levels within their sport. I feel that it's important to start off with a thank you for those taking the time to listen to the podcast today and sharing this vital sentiment, that all athletes are so much more than just their sport. I feel like we get lost in this idea when we are performing at the elite level that our self-worth is based on our athletic performance. Especially as female athletes, the tendency to value ourselves solely based on our ability to be the best within our area of athletic expertise is too common and too frequent. I know I've experienced this, but it's honestly so easy to look at myself as only the achievements I've made within my sport. I'll look at my teammates and think I'm not worth it. I'll sacrifice my mental health and even my physical well-being to be the best athlete I think I should be. And this mindset and attitude becomes extremely ingrained in our behavior patterns in sports, as a lot of coaches encourage and even motivate athletes to place this immense amount of emphasis on their successes, and the pressures of this coaching style can lead to this unhealthy mindset and the terrible relationship between the athlete and their sport of choice. Overall, before we begin today, I would like to say that all female athletes are more than their sport. You are more than your gold medals, silver medals, and even last place finishes. You are more than your body weight and strength, the calories you burn, and the food that you eat. You are more than the number of flips you can do and the accolades your coach gives you. Remember that athletics is something you choose to do and participate in, as it brought you joy and excitement. It is not a defining characteristic of your personality or the human that you are. That is up to you. And athletics is just something that I feel that we should do because of our love of the sport, and our drive to succeed should be based on this passion and enjoyment, not the pressures of those around us. Unfortunately, this mindset is not always the easiest to attain, and it's usually negatively impacted by the tendency of coaching practices to become emotionally abusive. And that's why we will be discussing the tendencies of emotional abuse in female athletics today and its long-term impacts on female athletes' mental health. Therefore, in order to fully understand the effects of emotionally abusive coaching practices on female athletes, I've brought in some guests to share their experiences and stories who can hopefully relate to other female athletes' experiences to create a situation of support and empathize with any athletes who may have encountered these emotionally abusive coaching practices.
I'm Savannah. I was a gymnast for 15 years, and then I started diving in 2016, and wait.
You were a gymnast for 15 years?
Yeah, I was.
I didn't know that. I knew you were a gymnast, but 15 years is a long time.
It was a very long time.
Yeah.
And then I started diving, and then I dove at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and then I transferred here sophomore year to FSU.
Very nice. Let's claps. Anna, your turn.
I'm Anna. I started out in gymnastics, and then when I was 10, I started diving. I did both for a little bit, and then it just got to the point where I had to pick one because it was too much, and I thought diving would be easier, so I picked that. Very quickly realized it wasn't. When I was about 13, I started diving 10 meter. I made my first Olympic trials when I was 14.
14?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I qualified for it.
Yeah,
That's absolutely insane.
In Iowa.
Wow.
In 2011.
Wow.
So I competed at my first Olympic trials when I was 16, though. I made my first world team when I was 15 in China. Then I went on to dive at Purdue with some injuries and stuff. I had to stop my junior year. And then I took about 5 years away from the sport. It was really hard for me to have to stop, and just being around it made me sad. So I thought I was done. I completely left. I didn't want to go to the pool. I didn't want to watch diving. And then in August, I was living in Midland where I grew up, and the current head coach there texted me and was like, "Hey, are you interested in coaching? We really need new coaches." I coached for about a month there and fell in love with it again, and then that's what brought me here pretty quickly after.
I'm glad you're here.
Well, that was a long intro compared to me.
That's okay.
That was good.
That was very good. I'm Skylar. I'm currently a diver, freshman at Florida State, and I was a gymnast up until I was 14 years old. and then transferred into sportive diving. That was really hard, like going from somewhere where I knew I was good to somewhere where I was like starting with novice kids and I was like the oldest one there. That was rough. And so I know you feel that pain when you like switch over into a new sport. But yeah, then I've been diving ever since. So we can just go from there. Thank you. Anyways, thank you for talking to me today, actually. Like, I'm really, really grateful you're doing this.
Of course.
But, yeah. I think the first thing I wanted to go over was... Let me open this. So, these are the questions I asked Anna. I said, what were some of the emotionally abusive coaching tactics you encountered within your collegiate or national level of athletic experience? Like, it doesn't, if both of you can just, like, talk. It's open.
Wait, can we talk gymnastics and college?
Yes, both.
Ooh, fun.
Because I feel like it's, like,
Oh, boy.
every sport is slightly different, but there's lots.
Okay, so in gymnastics, I had Romanian and Bulgarian coaches.
Ooh.
And so our dance instructor was Bulgarian, and she would call the little kids little French fries, and any of the larger kids who had more muscle mass, she would call them sumo wrestlers. And she said you didn't want to look like a sumo wrestler because that's not feminine. So there was a little bit of that on the team, so that immediately created body image issues within our team. And then just pushing athletes a little too hard too early on in their life. We were doing gymnastics for 7-8 hours a day with an hour break for schoolwork, and a lot of the kids just were constantly injured, aka me. Yeah, I could imagine, like 7 to 8 hours. Did they really like allow that in an hour of schoolwork? Yeah.
Were you guys all homeschooled?
We were all homeschooled. We did so practice was starting at like 8 or 9 in the morning, and then we'd go till 12, and then we'd have an hour break, and then most of us would do private lessons somewhere in that hour. Wow. And then we started practice again at like 1 or 2 depending, and then we went until 4 or 5, and then private lessons continued, and then Saturdays we were there from 9 to 12 just doing straight conditioning and running. So.
I could not, like, I thought, so when I was a gymnast, we had like 4-hour workouts, and then on Fridays, it was like, I left school early to get there, because, had to, yeah. And then you'd have like 30-minute break to eat, and then you got to do more gymnastics. Yeah. And it was insane, and like, I never really processed that, like, that was bad. Like, in my head, I was like, oh, that's normal, because like, that's what you grow up in, and then it's so normalized to get around like everyone that you're with. Like the older girls are doing way more hours than that, so you're like, this is fine. You know what I mean? It's insane. And like there are so many like coaching practices within that I was like, oh, I should be treated this way, and it's like clearly I shouldn't have been. Right. But what else? If there's anything else, because that's already bad.
I'm trying to think. I feel like I didn't really have that terrible of an experience with gymnastics coaches, but diving, when I went to Bowling Green State University, the coach there recruited me, and she had really high hopes for me, and I had just had hip surgeries, so I was out for 6 months, and the first day back on the board, she wanted me to throw my entire list.
Really?
Yeah.
I would, if John asked me that, I'd be like, no.
Yeah. So I immediately was like, Trisha, like, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. And she just kept pressuring me and was like, well, you're a college diver. You should be doing college dives. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I understand that these are supposed to be dives that I do on a regular basis, but I just can't do that right now. And so then if I couldn't do the dives, she would just send me to do conditioning. And so the conditioning was all leg workouts, and so I'd have to do like lunges for like an hour straight.
On the hip, that was just like...
Yeah.
I am so sorry.
And then we had girls who would throw up during stadiums, and she would blame it on them drinking the night before, even though it was a Wednesday night. None of us had alcohol in our systems. Mm-hmm. And my roommate would throw up because she had terrible asthma and she couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And so she had that, and then she had some other stuff going on in her personal life that she couldn't always come to practice in the best mood.
Yeah.
And Trisha got really mad, and they basically tried to kick her off the team for having these other personal issues that she had no control over. So
yeah. Damn. Yeah, I feel like a common theme amongst a lot of like these emotionally abusive coaching practices is like punishing with conditioning. It's
yes.
like I'd noticed that a lot. And like I had experience with that in gymnastics. There was this one time, it was like my entire level 4 team, they would group punish us, which is in itself really wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
John
like
used to do that.
Yeah, it's like this idea of like, oh, like 3 people mess up, you're all failures is like clearly not healthy at all. Mm-hmm. And so there was like a large portion of the team had
second place is the first loser.
Yep.
John used to say that.
Yes. So a large group of us had like fallen off the beam, but I don't think I did. It was like during a competition. I think it was like regionals or something. And so all of the gymnastics coaches were like, so many of you guys fell off the beam that we're going to punish all of you. And we had to do 8 scissor rope climbs in a row at like 13. And, or younger, because a ton of the kids in level 4 were not 13. I was one of the older ones. And I remember I got into the car and like I had like not blood, but like, you know, when you break capillaries because you're like working, doing so much. And I got in and my mom was like, what did they just make you do? I was like, rope climbs. Like, I thought that was fine. But like, I look back at it now and a lot of the ways in which they treated us was not okay. And like this idea of like, I have to be maintaining this certain level so that they actually like will coach me or like believe me. And another thing is like pushing through injuries. Like I struggled with Oshkinsladders because it's like, when you're growing up and doing so much like workout, like you're gonna have issues. And so vaulting would be like I had so many issues with vault because my knees would hurt when I was running. And like I literally didn't run in PE because they make you run in PE. I don't know why. I had to run a mile, but I didn't run for like a year. And so I could do gymnastics, and when I was vaulting, it would always hurt, and I'd tell my coach, and it got to a point where he like stopped believing me that I had like knee issues. And so at a certain point I was afraid to say that I had injuries. And I still struggle to that with this day. Like I'm scared to tell people when something hurts because I don't want them to not coach me anymore. I don't want them to look at me as like, oh, she's broken, she's done, she's like no good for me anymore.
Yeah, that's something I dealt with a lot, like at the beginning of diving, really all through like my high school career of diving. Just like being hurt and my coach getting mad about it. Mm-hmm. And because he was angry, he would push me through the injury. Like I remember I was 13 at the beginning of practice. I fell off a dry board, broke my tibia.
Oh my God.
And I'd practice that day. So my coach was like, it's fine, like you can just do lineups today. He was pissed at me, he was yelling at me, called my mom, yelled at my mom. And so I couldn't walk, I couldn't put weight on it, so I was carrying myself up to 7 meter, doing lineups. Every time I hit the water, it would throw my ankle weird, and I would come up crying. Our assistant coach came up to me and said, why are you crying? He's not mad at you. And I said, well, he is mad at me, and I'm crying because it hurts.
Yeah.
And then that same injury, like I went to the doctor, got an MRI, confirmed it was broken. They put me in a long leg cast for about 2 months. I got my cast off. I was in my boot. I came to practice to watch. Mm-hmm. And my coach said, we're doing handstands. You can do handstands.
Oh.
So I was doing some handstands, and then he said, no, you need to take your boot off. And I was like, no, I'm not supposed to. And he was like, well, it's just handstands. You'll be fine. Take it off. So I took it off, kicked up into a handstand. First one, my ankle popped. Like, so much pain. And he yelled at me. I was crying because it hurt. I was sitting on a mat. He walked out of the room, came back with an ice pack, threw it at me, and said, maybe I'll coach you in high school, and walked out. So that was, like, the most severe. But really, like, every single time I got hurt, it was the same thing. And it got to the point where I was scared to tell him. So I was at a meet in Fort Lauderdale. It was my first international meet, and it was my first day of practice, and he said, let's go up to 10 meter and just do a jump so you can get used to this platform. I was like, okay, sounds good. So I went up there, I did a jump. When I hit the water, I dislocated my knee. I didn't want to tell him. I was terrified, so I didn't. I got out, I went behind the platform, put my knee back in place, and I finished my workout. The next day, I got up, my knee was huge. I tried to take a step and just collapsed. And, like, my mom and my coach were like, what's going on? And I said, I think I walked on sand weird yesterday. I don't know what's wrong with my knee. Because I didn't want to tell him. I didn't want to tell him I heard it. I didn't want to tell him it was at practice. And I was like, it's fine. I can push through the meet. I'll be good. Leading up to the meet, all the trainers were like, you need to drop out. And John was like, that's not an option. You're here to represent the United States. This isn't about you. You have to dive.
Yeah.
So I went up to 10 meter. I did my list, basically jumping off one leg. Dove terrible. I got 32nd. And he was so mad. And the thing he said, he was like, this is why you train through adversity, so that you're able to do these things. And he was like, that's like the point of this sport, is learning adversity and training through it and pushing through it so that you can compete when this happens. And I thought that was normal.
Yeah.
There were so many meets that I went to where I would get sick or something, or get hurt right before it. And he was like, this is what we train for.
Yeah.
Push through it. And I always thought, like, we trained for this because I was always hurt because you never let me take a break.
Right.
Like, we wouldn't need to train for this if you would just let me heal.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the time, I was like, no, you're right. This is what it's like being an elite athlete.
Yeah.
This is what I have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this, like, idea, like, oh, like, being an elite athlete means being in pain. Or, like, being an elite athlete means I don't get to listen to my body or listen to what I think is right. Like, I just have to listen to those who have a higher authority over me.
Yeah.
Because you think that's, like, what you need to do.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry you had to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. That's so extreme, like, gnarly. Like, you had to pop your knee behind the tower. I think you told me that the other day, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah. And then, like, also growing up, I was the oldest one on the team. I was the only one who was really at the elite level. Like, we had some junior divers who were national level, but I was the only one who was, like, at the Olympic level. So I was training twice a day, and in the mornings, it was just me and my coach. And it was so intense, but I didn't realize it at the time. And now, like, looking back, like, we had this rule where if I was in twister belt and I was struggling with it, I mean, really, even if I wasn't struggling with it, our rule was you don't get out of the water, or you don't get out of the belt until your stomach is bleeding. Because the twister belts hurt.
Yeah.
They were too big for me. So the twister part of it would come up, hit me in the ribs, pinch me, and then twist.
Yeah, I had that issue too.
So I wasn't allowed to get out of belts until I was bleeding. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. And then recently, I mentioned it to a therapist as, like, a funny story. And she was like, Anna, that's abuse. And I was like, what? And she was like, that's physical abuse. And I was like, no, it's not. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. No, I got really lucky, and, like, going into diving, I had coaches that were really understanding. Like, Michelle and Todd were very good about, like, if something hurts, like, please tell us. We don't want you to dive through it. Probably because they had experiences like that growing up, and they didn't want that. And, like, coming from gymnastics where I was taught to ignore that, and going into diving where they were like, please tell us, was really weird, and I still struggled with that. But, like, I never faced the extreme, like you had to face. Like, that's insane. You know what I mean? I'm very sorry.
Yeah, I didn't think about the injury portion of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely experienced many injuries in gymnastics. I also had Sever's disease, which is basically where the same pain that you had in your knee, but in the heel.
Oh, yeah.
And so it hurt to run, it hurt to jump, it hurt to walk. I would be limping at school, and then I'd get to practice and have to pretend it wasn't there and just compete. And I remember I broke my foot, and the coaches did not believe me. And so I competed all season. I think I broke it in January or March, and had to compete all the way through states and regionals. And then after that, I was finally like, I need to get this fixed. And they were like, no, we have to start training for next season. And I was like, my foot hurts anytime I walk on it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, and so I finally, my mom just took me and was like, we need to see if this is like actually broken. And it was. And so they put me in a cast, and I came back, and my coaches said I needed to stop milking my injuries.
Oh.
And then told me that they were like, is this really going to happen to you every single year, every single season? And it's like, yeah, because we are not allowed to have a rest season. There's no off season. I think a lot of people think like sports have an off season. But in gymnastics and diving, that's not true.
Yeah.
You work year round. Like there is no stopping.
Yeah.
So
You get the occasional like 4 days off.
Literally,
Yeah.
I was just talking to someone about that. They were like, "Oh, when's your off season?" I was like, "Diving doesn't have one. Like,
Yeah.
you never stop diving.
Yeah.
Like your summer, you're diving. Your Christmas break, you're diving. Like you're never not working out. And like, yeah, we taper. Yeah, we do less. But it's like your body is always like under constant impact. And like some people don't realize that diving. Like, gymnastics, it's like, it's hard on your body. Like,
Yeah.
you watch these girls, it's hard. But some people don't realize how hard diving is on people's bodies. Because it's all, not only is it all just, like, your strength, but you're hitting the water at, like, a speed that, like, you shouldn't, like, most people don't have to experience. And it breaks down your body and your muscles, and you end up with so many injuries. And, like, the amount of times I've pushed through, like, my wrists were super swollen before nationals this last year. And I had shin splints, and I was like, no, I'm fine. Like, I can do it. And it's like, I probably should have taken a break, but I just didn't have the opportunity because there's no off season, you know?
Well, and that's something I didn't really realize how much it impacted my body until I was done diving. Like, really a few years after diving, I started having, like, all these pains, and, like, recently found out I have bulging discs in my back. And just, like, random sprains and pains that I have, and it just got me thinking, like, I pushed myself so hard when I was younger without realizing it and thinking it was normal that now I have to deal with this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that sucks. And because, like, the bulging discs in my back, I can pinpoint when it happened. And I didn't realize it at the time. It hurt so bad, and I was like, it's fine, I have to go do another one.
Yeah.
And now, like, thinking back, I'm like, that's when it happened.
Yeah.
Like, that's when I hurt myself, and I kept diving, and for sure made it worse. And now I have to deal with it forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like one of the things I was going to talk about was like long-term consequences. It's like pushing your body so hard at such a young age and having nobody like come and be like, that's not okay. You know what I mean? You end up with these long-term consequences of like injuries and like I have so many problems with like anxiety and like listening to my body, like knowing when to be like, is this okay for me to do? Or like struggling with like food has always been something I struggle with, like what I'm eating and everything, because you're like, oh, I have to meet a certain body standard. So like to this day, I still am like, no, I shouldn't eat that, or like, should I eat that? Or like listening to like, when am I actually hungry? Because I've been taught like, you have to eat healthy, you have to eat right, you have to do all these things, and it's like that, like there's this line between like disordered eating and eating disorder that is so easy to walk on when you're in athletics, like at that elite level.
Yeah, so I started struggling with that a lot. I mean, honestly, like thinking back, I started struggling with my body image when I was maybe 11. I hurt my shoulder and took like 3 months off, and I got in the water, put a swimsuit on, got in the water my first day back, and my mom cried because I didn't look the same as I did 3 months ago. And like that just crushed me. And it, like, after that, it got to the point where I was like, it doesn't really matter how I dive, it just matters how I look. Like, diving is such a spectator sport. I mean, like, you're literally judged on how you look as you're falling through the air.
Exactly.
And then I had my first knee surgery when I was about 16, and I got put on a meal plan by the USA Diving nutritionist. I had never met her face-to-face. She didn't know me at all. Like, we talked for about 10 minutes on the phone, and I said, I want to lose weight. And she said, okay, here's a meal plan. I was 15. Wait. No, it was after knee surgery, so I was 16. But I couldn't walk, so my mom was in charge of my meal plan. I remember sitting on the couch. She brought me, like, my food, like, my breakfast or whatever. I was a little nauseous from the pain meds, so I didn't finish it. And she said, oh, that's good, because you're not working out, and you need to lose weight, so, like, that's fine. And from that point on, I was like, oh, okay, so, like, the less I eat, the better. I think I finished half of my breakfast that day. And from then on, it was the same thing. Like, the less I eat, the better. I remember the first day I skipped lunch, and I felt so proud of myself. Like, just so proud of myself. Yeah. And, like, that feeling of fulfillment just kind of carried on. Like, people started saying, oh, you look so good. I was diving really well. And that lasted for a little bit, obviously, until I lost too much weight that I couldn't make my dives.
Yeah. In diving, there's this thing where it's like, when you're skinnier, it's easier to rip. Like, I've noticed that with, like, a lot of the younger kids and, like, people who tend to be, like, naturally on the skinnier side, so easy for them to rip. And, like, I've been, like, pretty fortunate. And it's, like, I have a naturally, like, fast metabolism. So, like, I haven't struggled with, like, gaining a lot of weight. But there was a period of time where I was on birth control and, like, I did gain weight. And I was, like, I'm not hitting the water the same way. And, like, so I did start, like, controlling my eating because I was, like, I'm not as skinny as I used to be. So I'm not getting the same injuries. And, like, when you're in the air and you watch those, like, really, really skinny divers, like the Chinese girls who are, like, just pin or skinny, and they, like, hit the water with no splash, like, in your head you're like, oh, it's because they're skinny. You're like, I need to look that way, you know?
Well, and, like, the thing is, I didn't have proper education on it. So, like, I lost a certain amount of weight or whatever, and then I was like, okay, that's good, I should probably stop. I didn't know how. And so I just kept losing weight, like, tons of weight, and I didn't know how to stop it. And then I was like, it's fine, it's not really a problem, until I was 18. We went prom dress shopping, and we could not find a dress that fit me. I got a 000 dress and had to have it taken up. Like, I was just so small, and I didn't necessarily like it, but I didn't know how to stop it. And then it got to the point where, like, just mentally, I was afraid of food. I was afraid to eat. I was afraid to gain weight. My mom was weighing me once a week to make sure I wasn't gaining weight. And then it got to the point where I was like, I think I have an eating disorder, but I didn't want to tell anyone. I remember at my weight coach, he was like, how much weight have you lost? You look great. He was like, 5 pounds. And it was more like 30. And I was like, yeah, about 5 pounds. And he was like, well, you look great.
Yeah, that's also the issue, is that, like, everyone around you was like, you look good, keep losing weight. Like, I don't know why that is such a thing that's, like, I don't know, because, like, everyone puts on weight differently with muscles, you know what I mean? Like, some people have, like, lean muscles, some people, like, they get, like, quads, you know what I mean? Especially with girls and, like, weight training. Like, I could lift the same amount of weight, and I just will not put on muscle in the way that other people do. But, like, I feel like they expect, like, female athletes to put on weight in the same way. Yeah. And so they'll look at you and they'll be like, oh, you look good, because you're losing weight, but, like, not gaining the muscle, right?
Yeah, well, and then I went to college. And everybody was like, you need to gain weight, you need to gain weight. And I was like, I know, but I want to gain the right weight.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can only gain muscle, and I do that by working out. I don't do that by eating. So I was, like, busting my ass in weights. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting sore. Yeah. I was just exhausted. Like, I was lethargic. I, like, was just weak, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't gaining muscle. And that continued for, like, a year until I started getting treatment for my eating disorder and, like, learned how to actually take care of myself. And that was just such a long process that really I still deal with. Like, so much of the last 8 years have just been me trying to heal from this eating disorder and trying to, like, learn how to live my life again. And I don't know. It's just hard because I feel like it could have been avoided. And I know a lot of it is genetic or whatever, but I strongly believe that the situations you're put in growing up teach you how to live your life. And I mean, when I was 14, 15, when I was first starting to do 10 meter, I had a lot of anxiety. So I went to a psychologist who told me that she could help me shut my brain off. So I did biofeedback. She was putting, like, electrodes around my scalp, and we literally trained twice a week how to shut out my emotions.
Right.
And so I didn't know what I was feeling. I stopped feeling pain. Mm-hmm. I stopped feeling hunger. I, just stopped feeling everything so that I could dive better. And I completely lost, literally how to take care of myself. And that's something I'm still working on with therapists is, what can you do today to take care of yourself? And I'm like, I don't know, I have this, and this to do. And they're like, okay, but, are you doing self-care? And I'm like, I don't.
No.
Self-care doesn't feel like self-care. It feels like a waste of time.
Yeah.
And it stresses me out, so I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I think also a lot of times with athletics, especially in college and stuff, I mean, you have school, you have practice, you have all these different things that you're supposed to be at. You barely have time to finish your homework at night. How are you supposed to try and work on your mental health?
Yeah.
There's no time for it.
That's what I've struggled with the most. I mean, it's only been 3 months, and I've just now, for the first time, sat down and watched a movie with my roommates. Mm-hmm. I usually spend most of my days, I get back to my dorm and I do homework. And, my time to have self-care is eating. That is when I have self-care. And, I've shown people my schedules, and they're like, when do you have free time? I'm like, there's none. Yeah. That doesn't exist, Yeah. And I feel what's difficult is, with athletics, you have to be doing a certain amount. Collegiate athletics, you have to be working out a certain amount so that you're getting good enough. But at the same time, there has to be a balance. You can't, I spend all of my days, we have 3-hour workouts, and then we have weights, and then in between that, I'm doing school. Mm-hmm. There's never any time for me to I want to sit and read a book,
right.
Mm-hmm. And also is my major's harder, so it makes sense. But I feel it's so normalized to not give yourself self-care and just be you're an athlete, you need to do athletic stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also a lot of times so I work with the hidden opponent, which is learning about and teaching about mental health within athletics, and just trying to help athletes understand what's okay, what's not okay, even helping coaches try and figure out how they can help their athletes. And it's crazy because so many of the athletes will say I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Hold up.
I have something to say while you think about that.
This is a momentary brain fart in the middle of the...
No, yeah, and I feel it gets to the point where you don't realize that that's what you need. Mm-hmm. Or that what you're doing is a problem. I remember my senior year of college, when my eating disorder became apparent, and my mom came up to me and she was like, I think we should take care of this before you go to college. I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you know? I have to go to college. And I was pissed at her because she was finally realizing I had an eating disorder, and I thought it was all her fault.
Yeah.
So I was like, now you get it? Anyway.
Yes.
So, and what she meant was, I think you should go to treatment.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because I didn't understand that. I was like, no, I can't stop my life and take care of myself. So then I went to college, and I was miserable for 2 years, and then I decided I needed to go to treatment, and I told her, and she said, no, you should have taken care of this a while ago. But you can't do it now. She was like, you're wasting your life. She came to visit me at Purdue, and I talked to her about this, and she left a day early because she was so mad.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
I remember now.
Okay, go. Perfect.
So with the hidden opponent, we teach about the mental health disorders and stuff like that. And one of the things that's a lot of athletes bring up is with an injury, you can see somebody's injured, but with mental health, you can't look in someone's brain and go, oh, they're messed up, or they're struggling. You can't see that unless somebody says it. And it's so, when you bring it up, a lot of times people ignore it because they can't see how much pain you're in. And so then you are embarrassed to even say anything, so you shut it out, you're quiet, you don't tell anyone, and then you're struggling so much on the inside that you're a lot of times kids will quit sports, or they're not able to continue because they're so unhealthy, or they're just pushing through, and it's affecting their life in so many other ways. So it's really important that coaches understand when an athlete says, like, I need a rest day, or I need time off because of whatever, that they really need to provide support, and not just allowing them to have those days off, but ask how they can help. Like, do you need to go see a therapist?
Yes.
Do you need, what can I do to help you?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like along those same lines, like, there's just such a lack of education, and there's such a mental health stigma because people don't understand. Like, they haven't been through it, so they don't understand that when you say, like, I'm really struggling, it's not a choice that you can just make in your brain to be, like, to change your attitude and be happier. Because so many times people have told me, like, your mental state is your decision.
Exactly.
Like, you have to choose happiness. And it's like, I have clinical depression.
Yeah.
I can't choose to be happy.
Yeah,
I can't choose to not be suicidal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why these thoughts are coming up, and I can't control them.
Yeah.
And that's something I learned after my diving career, throughout all of my therapy, is that our thoughts are not a choice. We can learn how to deal with them, but we can't control what our brain does.
Yeah. And half the time it's a product of the situation you were in. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the experiences you go through is what actually creates that, like, chemical imbalance for you.
Yeah.
And it's like this idea of, like, nature versus nurture and everything. But I personally believe that, like, your environment heavily influences how you think, feel, learn to think and feel. And, like, I think it's really important, like, in order to, like, break this, like, these practices down, and so that coaches don't keep doing this because it's so normalized in, like, elite athletics, is like they have to be educated on this, and there has to be a shift in this perspective of, like, you can't, like, if an athlete comes to you with a problem, you should listen to them. Like, I think it takes a lot of courage for people to speak up, and half the time they get shut down.
It shows more strength than it does weakness, and I don't think many people see it as that.
No, a lot of people see it like they're scared to say something because they don't know what's going to happen to them. I mean, like, when I was in college and I was, like, struggling so hard, I knew I shouldn't have been diving, and they took me out for a little bit because my weight wasn't where it was supposed to be, but as soon as I hit that minimum, I was back.
Right.
And I don't know, like, I was just so scared to say something because diving felt like my job in college.
Yes.
And if I said something, I was scared I was going to lose my scholarship. I was scared I was going to lose my education, so I didn't.
Yeah.
And then when I finally did, my coach kicked me off the team.
Exactly.
Like, I went to treatment, and it didn't align with his Christian beliefs. He said, you're choosing a secular path. This isn't going to help you. I don't think you have what it takes to be on a college team, and he kicked me off.
Yeah, which is also extremely emotionally abusive.
Yeah.
Because you should not be kicked off of a team for something that you're struggling with, like mental health.
And he
A lot
thought...
of times it's an outlet.
Yeah. Well, and, like, he thought that he was helping in a way. Like, he was really pushing his beliefs on me, and thought, like, if you're not diving, you'll be okay. But I just felt like I couldn't articulate. Like, I was just so depressed, like, dealing with so much that I couldn't articulate what I needed.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I needed. And taking away something that was my whole life since I was 10 years old crushed me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, at the time, like, I knew I needed a break. I knew I needed some time off. And I was thankful for that. But I wasn't ready to be done. And it was so forced. And, like, I've talked to other people who have gone through mental health stuff and eating disorders and diving. And I actually have a friend who went to a university, and the same thing happened to her. She got kicked off, and she sued the school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she told me that I realized what happened to me was not okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to, like, it's a choice, my mom had always told me, you can't have a pity party. Like,
yeah.
She told me that when she was in high school, she went through a time where she was really, really upset and felt depressed. And her mom said, please stop having a pity party. And so she started just playing the song Don't Worry, Be Happy. And she was like, so that's just how I live. She's like, I don't need to, have these... She's like, you can't have a pity party. Like, she's like, life has to go on. And so anytime I'd come up to her and try and tell her, like, I'm struggling, she was like, Savannah, stop. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, she's like, you can't control it, so just let it go.
But that's not how it works.
It was the
At
same
all.
thing in our house. Like, we weren't allowed to cry. If we cried, she said, go do that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, get it together.
Yeah.
Bring a good attitude. Like, that's...
You always have to have
You
a
always
positive,
have to have a positive attitude.
And also, I was always told, like, oh, you're a really positive person. You always, like, have a smile on your face. And so then I felt
You internalize
so
that.
compelled to always have this smile on my
Well,
face.
you just internalize the identity that other people want you to have, and I dealt with that a lot, too.
Yeah.
Like, I was the perfect child. I was the teacher's pet. I was the perfect athlete. And if I let any of that go, like... I didn't know who I was because that's who I was supposed to be.
I've struggled with that for the last year. I've spent most of my life not being like receiving like the accolades I needed to unless I was achieving something.
Yeah.
In gymnastics, in diving, in school, in literally every aspect. And so I had this huge notion, like, I have to be perfect all the time. I have to be the best student. I have to be the best athlete, or else I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And that's so reflected not only in like the way in which your parents are treating you, but also in the way in which your coaches are treating you, because they treat you differently if you aren't exactly what they want you to be.
Yeah.
And I spent so many years like thinking that like everything that I was doing was okay when I look back at it, and I'm like, I was not happy. Like, I spent so many years struggling that I could have just like spoken up, and I didn't, because I thought that was okay, and that's how I needed to be.
Yeah. My first day of diving ever, after my practice, my coach went up to my mom and said she was born to wear an Olympic medal. And that was my identity from there on out. My Olympic dreams were not my dreams.
No.
They were my
that's-
mom's, and they were my coaches, and all I felt was pressure to achieve that goal. And if I didn't, I thought I was letting them down. I thought I was letting myself down. I thought I wasn't who I was supposed to be. When I was 13, I wanted to quit diving. My mom said that's not an option. This is a God-given talent, and it's your responsibility to live it out.
That is another thing that has always bothered me, is like, I went into diving as a gymnast, so like I didn't have any knowledge of diving, and like one of the first things they told me was like, you were born to dive, like you had the body type for it, or like people look at you and they're like, oh, you have the hands, you have the arms, you have the feet, and so like it almost becomes ingrained into you, like I have potential, I need to reach it. And so like my coaches would always, like when I got recruited for diving, it wasn't because I was good enough, it was because I had potential. And so I placed so much pressure on myself to succeed, because all these other people were putting this like really abstract, like huge notion on me that like you're meant for greatness, you're meant to do really good things. And so I never had this opportunity to be like, am I actually enjoying it, or am I doing it for everybody else's like approval and standards? You know?
Well, and like being told that, it's like that becomes your identity and that's your purpose in life. And then what, like, coaches just don't understand that this sport can't be your whole life, because at some point you have to be done.
Yes.
And when I stopped diving, that was my purpose in life, and I didn't achieve it. I never got that Olympic medal, so my purpose was over. And that's when I got suicidal.
Yeah.
I said, I don't have anything else to live for. I can't achieve my goals. I can't achieve what I'm supposed to do in life, so I don't have a purpose on this earth anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think I should be here. Like, it wasn't because I'm sad and I can't take this anymore. It was because I had no purpose, and I felt like I was a waste of space.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm really sorry. It's hard. And it's like these coaching practices don't make it any better. Like if I had supportive coach, like I did have supportive coaches, but it doesn't mean everything was perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you still have, even with the best coaches, they still tend to sway to this like this idea, like they have this authority over you and this power over you in which they want you to do something, so you're like, oh, I have to achieve that. And like if I wasn't doing my best, sometimes like my coaches, like I noticed kids who like weren't successful or weren't achieving things, they would just ignore them. They wouldn't coach them anymore. And I was terrified of not being coached. And so like it's like these coaching practices put this emphasis on like we have to achieve greatness in order for people to approve of us, and that becomes your purpose for so long that you lose this perspective, especially within athletics. You think that's my only like purpose in life is to be successful here, and so you lose this other half of yourself. And like I've spent the last year trying to figure out like what else am I besides a good student and an athlete. Like, what do I like in myself? And I have a therapist, and she'll be like, you are so much more than just a good student and a good athlete. Like, you're a good person. Like, I would tell her, like, what I like about myself, and she's like, those are achievements. Like, those aren't things that you actually like about yourself. That's what other people told you to like, you know? And I've had to relearn, like, oh, I like myself because I'm kind, or I like myself because I'm empathetic. Not like, I like myself because I did well at that last meet. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, and every Olympian I've talked to about their experience at the Olympics, when it was over, they were in a dark place.
That's what I've heard.
They got so depressed because they just achieved this goal that they set their life up for, their life goal, their life mission, and they don't know what's next. Yeah. They said that was the high point of my life. Nothing can beat that.
Exactly.
And so, just nothing can make you happy. Yeah, like, it's like, I don't have anything else to live for because I already did it.
Exactly.
So even when you do achieve those goals, it's not, you don't get that fulfillment that you thought you would get your whole life. Because it's one meet and then it's over.
Yeah, I know. And it's so heavily ingrained into us, like, that is where you will be fulfilled. Like, everyone that you talk to is like, the greatest achievement you can make as an athlete is going to the Olympics. Yeah. But it's not.
I have not met one Olympian who told me that after they made the Olympics, after they competed at the Olympics, that they felt life fulfillment. Yeah. Every single one of them has told me that they were depressed and they didn't know what their next steps were.
Yeah, exactly. And, like,
I really think there should be therapy for athletes, or a group for athletes who have retired from injury or whatever the reason may be, or because they've achieved their final goal.
I agree with that. Like, I know some...
We don't know what we are after that. We're just a person now. Yeah. But we've been an athlete. Like, who are you now?
Yeah, exactly.
No one.
Yeah. It's like it was literally inside class. It was like, write down defining characteristics, and I wrote athlete. And then I thought to myself, that's not a defining characteristic. That's just something I do. Diving is a sport that I do.
When you tell people, oh, you're an athlete, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Yeah. But when you tell people, oh, I'm a good student,
no.
Yeah. Okay.
Or like, cool.
Everyone is
I work hard. Yeah. You know, like, okay, cool. Like, it's like,
like, growing up, just because I lived in a small town and because I achieved so much, everyone knew me.
Right.
And that's just who I was. I was Anna the diver. When I introduced myself to people, they'd be like, oh, you're the diver. And I was like, yep, I'm a diver. That's all I am.
do that too.
And, like, I remember I went to the grocery store after Olympic trials, my first Olympic trials. I didn't compete very well at Olympic trials, and everybody in Midland was watching me. And I went to the grocery store, I checked out, and my cashier said, oh, you're the girl that went to the Olympic trials, right? And I was like, yeah. And he said, what happened? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, you didn't make it. And I was like, yeah, I had a bad meet. It was my first Olympic trials. I'm 16 years old.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't make it.
Yeah.
And it pissed me off so much. Like, I was just so mad. And I felt so bad about myself because I let this random person who I didn't even know down.
Yeah. I know, and you, like, not only do you feel like you let your coaches down, because they make that visibly obvious if you do poorly in a meet, and then when you're at that elite level, your parents will be disappointed in you, and then people around you will be disappointed in you, and you're like, this sport isn't about you, this is about me, this is about, like, I choose to do this because I enjoy it, but, like, when you lose that perspective because of the coaching and everything, you don't feel that way, and so it becomes apparently obvious that, like, oh, I'm doing this for everyone else. And that's why you get sucked into this void of, like, I have to succeed, or I have to achieve what my coach is like. I have to push through injuries or push through all these things because your coach is like, you feel like that's the only way you're worth it.
Right, look at Simone Biles, who just had to drop out of the Olympics because of her mental health.
Exactly.
And people got so mad and said she shouldn't have competed, that she should have let somebody else take her spot.
No.
Like, mental health can come on at any point in time. You don't know you're going to have a bad meet. You don't know that you're going to have these mental struggles to where all of a sudden your skills just go away. Yeah. And that's not anything you can control.
Oh, and I feel like those lines get so blurred when you're an elite athlete because, like, when I went to college, actually, like, before that, when I started competing for the United States, I was told, you're not competing for yourself anymore. You're representing the United States. If I'm not letting myself down when I compete bad, I'm letting my whole country down.
Yeah.
And then I went to college, and my coach told me, this is your job now. He was like, this is not something you're doing for yourself. You're competing for this school. You're representing this school. when you, like, if you don't dive well, if you don't dive at all, you're letting your team down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like that idea of group mentality.
Yeah.
So heavily emphasized.
And I don't think people realize that in diving because it's such an individual sport. But, like, there's just so much pressure to achieve for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I had something to say against, what were you saying about, you were just saying something. What were you
About
saying?
Simone Biles.
Simone Biles? Yes. I remember I was watching her because I was at Nationals in Indianapolis, and I was watching her on the TV, and the whole time I was like, I know that feeling. Like, you know the feeling of, like, you have a mental block, but you're like, I just can't do it.
And then the coach asks, what are you scared of? What are you scared of? And you're like, I'm not scared. I can't do it. I don't understand.
And what people don't realize is, like, she had the whole pressure. She had the pressure of the entire world saying she was the world's best gymnast. Imagine every single fucking person in the world, I'll have to cut that out. Every person in the whole world being like, you are the best gymnast ever. Like, that's so much pressure. And so you get to this Olympic level and you're standing there and you're like, if I mess up, I'm literally ruining it for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel that way when I'm like, I mess up. I feel like I'm ruining it for my coaches, my family, my teammates, like the whole swim and dive team. You know what I mean? Like, you already feel that way. Imagine it for the whole world. And so I watched her, and the whole time I felt like I understood it. And the whole time I was thinking, I was like, I know people who will look at her and be like, why is she doing that? Like, people who aren't athletes or people who don't understand that kind of pressure will never get it unless you, like, are educating them on it. And it's like...
And even then, if they haven't experienced it, a lot of times people can't honestly grasp it. Like, they cannot understand how you could feel so much pressure and how you have everyone supporting you. You have everyone supporting you, but it's not support.
Well, and it gets to the point where I feel like your accomplishments, you don't feel good about them. It stresses... Like, at least for me, anytime I accomplish something... I couldn't just be proud of myself because I had just set a new standard for myself that now I had to live up for.
Exactly.
The first time I got a 10 on one of my dives, it was a back 2.5, 1.5 on 10 meter. I got a 10 on it, and from that point forward, if I didn't get a 10,
you weren't good enough.
It wasn't good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And that's only further like affected by how your coaches treat you.
Yeah, it could be like, oh, it's a good dive, but it's not my best.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you reach a personal best, it's not your best anymore.
Yeah,
that's the lowest you should be getting.
Yeah, exactly. God, I know. I think what's important though is understanding how we can like prevent this, because like it's so heavily normalized, clearly, because we're 3 different people who have gone through 3 very different situations and all have similar experiences. And it's like the ways in which we can prevent this is like educating coaches and then holding people accountable. I think is what's important. Is there is such a lack of accountability. Like, coaches will get to this level where they're super, like, they instill these emotionally abusive coaching practices, but there's nobody there to stop them.
Right.
I also agree that there should be not only a sports psychologist for the athlete, but a sports psychologist for the coach.
Right. Yes.
And that's so that the coach can actually understand what they're doing is damaging their athletes.
Yes.
Yeah. And they may not even realize it.
Yeah, but no, half the time they don't.
Well, a couple days ago, I actually spoke to the sports psychologists who are going to start working with our club team, and they said, "Are you interested in coach sports psychology?" Yes. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. I didn't even know that was a thing, and I think that needs to be so normalized. And like now, as stuff is coming out that like abuse is happening in sports, like at least with USA Diving, they started doing Safe Sport.
Oh, but Safe Sport does nothing.
It's a 30-minute video where you learn about abuse, and there's no enforcement of it.
No, we haven't.
Nobody's checking on it. Nobody's coming into all of these programs and making sure that people are being treated humanely.
Exactly.
And I think communication is terrible among the coach and athlete, and so I think having a sports psychologist on deck where the athlete can go up to them and be like, I don't know how to approach my coach with this situation because I'm hurt and I don't want them to be mad.
Right.
You can't always approach your coach. You're scared. You know?
And I think from a coach perspective, at least, when I was going through the Safe Sport stuff, I was like, oh, I could never. I'm not. Nobody thinks of themselves as an abuser. Everybody's like, I'm a good person. I would never do this. But in the heat of the moment, it happens.
Yeah.
And people just, like, they don't recognize that they could be that way, so they're not aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody needs to realize, like, you're in a place of superiority over these athletes. Like, you're an authority figure to them. Mm-hmm. And that should put pressure on you.
Yes.
To be aware of yourself.
Yeah.
To be aware of what you're doing. And, like, now as I'm becoming a coach, like, that's my number one priority. Yeah. I don't want what happened to me. I just, like, if I ever did that to someone and realized that, any of the experiences that I had, like, I don't think I could live with myself. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I am, like, checking myself daily at practice, like, with my frustration levels. Like, what am I doing? How am I responding to them? Mm-hmm. And just making sure, like, I don't put people in a situation that I was in. And I think that's something that all coaches need to do. Yeah. Like, all coaches just need to be aware of, like, I have, like, so much of an impact on this person that everything I do can affect them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was always taught never say no to a coach.
Yes,
which,
me too.
If they're an authority figure, you should never tell somebody no. But yet, if you don't say no, you're being forced to do things that maybe you're not ready for. Yep. Maybe because you don't feel ready for it, because for whatever reason you're scared or whatever. But if you're scared and you're going up because you're too scared to say no, you're gonna get hurt. You're gonna something's gonna happen.
Or you're gonna have issues further on. Like, that's the reason why I didn't do gainers the other day. Was like, I know myself. Like, this is the first time, year, I guess, in which I'm, like, actually standing up for myself, and not, like, in a bad way, but in a way of, like, if I don't feel confident in, like, a dive or something, like, if I don't want to do it, I think that's important to listen to yourself and to be like, I'm not going to do this till I feel ready. Because when I do that, it'll be a much better dive than me going up there and throwing something and hating every minute of it, because then the sport doesn't become about you. It becomes about everyone else's expectations of you. Yeah. You know?
My career-ending dive, actually, I went up on 10 meter, and I hadn't slept all week because I was getting ready for final exams, and my coach wanted me to try a new dive. It was ready. I knew it was ready. But I was tired. I should have said, I don't feel ready today because I'm tired.
Yes. It's one day. Exactly.
Yeah. And I went up and I did it. And as soon as I went up, I lost sight of where I was. I had no clue where I was. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't strong enough to jump high enough because I was exhausted. Yeah. And I came out early and smacked, and that was the end.
Yeah, I remember one time I was at Nationals, and my coach had been making me do my 10-meter list 3 days in a row, and I had to compete it the next day. Mm-hmm. And I was so sore. I was so tired. I was competing reverse 3.5, which is the hardest dive I've ever done. And I was up on 10-meter, and I knew I couldn't make it. I didn't feel like I was strong enough to push myself away from the platform. Yeah. So I did a reverse 3.5, fell off the platform because I didn't want to hit my head on the platform. Yeah. Smacked, and got in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like they push and push and push and push. And when you're afraid to speak up because they have authority over you, and there's nobody to say, like, hey, like, that's not an okay coaching practice, and they don't have any guidelines of, like, how they should be treating athletes, you end up in these horrendous situations where you end up with career-ending injuries. And
thank goodness not life-ending.
Thank goodness.
For that time.
Career-ending injuries, and you end up with these situations in which you lose your, like, why am I doing this in the first place? Mm-hmm.
Right, and, like, along the same lines of, like, never saying no to your coach, we were taught you always thank your coach after practice.
Oh, yes.
And that was so hard for me. Like, sometimes when my coach would literally abuse me all practice, and then I would have to go up to him and say thank you. Yeah, And I don't think that's right. I don't think someone should have to thank their coach after practice. I think if your coach is treating you well and you truly feel thankful for that, of course, thank your coach. Yes. But if I just never think it should be enforced to tell someone something that you don't feel.
I was taught that in gymnastics. I was like, every day we all group said thank you. No matter if they yelled at you, if you were crying, if you competed through an injury, like, you always say thank you. And it's like, what am I thanking them for at this rate, you know?
Well, and with gymnastics, I never had a coach come up to you after practice every single day and give you a fist bump and tell you, great job.
Yeah.
If you did bad, you did bad and you didn't get anything for
Yeah.
it. But when I switched to diving, my coach came up to every single kid after every single practice, gave them a fist bump, handshake, high five, something. Mm-hmm. Even if they were having a terrible day and cried a bunch and couldn't do the dives that they wanted them to do. So as a coach now, I've really made an effort to, after each single practice, going up to every single kid and going, good job today.
Yeah, me too.
And I think what's important is like also as like people, as athletes who have had that experience, you guys know that like diving is scary, you know, like I think so many coaches forget like these things we're doing, they aren't easy. You're standing up there and you're like, oh my goodness, if I don't do this correctly, I could really hurt myself, you know? And I think it's important as for coaches in the future to remember like your athletes, they're doing this because they care about the sport and they love it, but like you should respect the fact that they're working this hard and that it's not easy. And I think like even just saying like, hey, good job, like even when you have a bad day, encourages you, you know, like not feeling like someone's disappointed in you because you had a bad day is so important.
Yeah, I feel like respecting someone's hard work is just vital.
Yeah.
I don't think any kid comes into practice and is like, I want to piss off my coach.
Right.
No.
And like we used to have practices, and if one person wasn't diving well, everybody got kicked out of practice.
Right. That's
Which is
so
group
messed
mentality.
up.
Super messed up. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you so much for all of this today. Like really, I have learned so much more than I ever thought. And it's like you read about these things online, you read people's experiences, but it's a lot different when you talk to people you know and you're like, oh my goodness, this is a collective issue.
Well, and even just today, I feel like I've been like, oh, that never happened to me. I didn't think about that. But then as we bring up these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was abused way more than I even realized.
Me
For
too.
sure. The more I talk about it, the more I realize like how much stuff happened that was like not okay.
And I think a lot of the times, like, I don't think my coaches ever intended for me to be affected in the way that I still am. And I mean, I'm sure that probably if they heard this, it would crush them.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, and like my coach growing up was honestly awful to me. And we had one meet where I did a dive, I hurt myself, he yelled at me, he sent me to the emergency room, didn't go with me, said have a nice night at the emergency room. I got home from that, I competed obviously the next day.
Yeah.
But then we get home from this meet, and the next day at practice, he was a different person. He recently told me that he got back to his hotel that night, looked at himself in the mirror, and didn't recognize who he was. He said he had become someone that he never wanted to be, and he didn't know how to change it, and he promised himself from that point forward he would never yell at an athlete again. And it was just such a drastic difference. And like right before I left for college, he sat me down and said, I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I'm sorry for anything that I caused. And he was like, can we talk about it? Like, tell me what I did so that I don't do it again. And at the time, I was still mad at him. Like, I was like, you can't just apologize and it makes up for everything. Like, I need to heal. And I didn't say anything to him. And like, now I'm in a place where I can talk to him about those things. And I can be like, yeah, this wasn't okay. This really affected me. And like, I feel comfortable with that. But that needs to be a thing from the start where you're able to tell your coach, like, this is happening and it's really damaging me.
Yeah.
And I think...
And like... I think coaches need education on that, and I think athletes need education on that too, because like when I was an athlete, like I didn't know those things were affecting me. It was just normal, and only now can I realize like, yeah, these things happen and this is how it affected me and this is how I had to heal from it.
Yeah.
And I think that gap between the things happening and healing from it, my gap was 8 years, and that's not okay.
Actually, I was gonna say, this doesn't have to go for this, but we should have a meeting with our kids and say, like, if you don't feel comfortable, please speak up.
Yeah.
Like, if you feel forced to do something that you're not ready for, speak up.
Well, and I thought that, like, we had Jordan do that front 3.5 pike. And, like, I thought he was ready.
I thought he was ready.
He was so ready. He was definitely ready, but after that practice, I could tell I don't think he was mentally ready, and I feel bad about that, and I need to talk to him about that. Like, I'm sorry for pushing you. if this happens in the future, tell me you're not ready.
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that. I'm not going to get mad at you.
He never asks for bubbles. Like, I constantly have to go, Jordan, do you want a call? Do you want bubbles? And then he's like, oh, yeah. And it's like, just tell us.
Yeah.
Tell us. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need.
I want my athletes to come up to me and tell me what they need and know what they need.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard. At least for me, it was really hard to know what I need because I was being told what I needed, even when...
Yes. Yeah, and it's I'm so grateful that you guys have that perspective and are able to treat your athletes differently, and like walking into a situation knowing that like you guys are doing that is, I'm like, I don't know, it's just, I'm super grateful for it, and I know that your athletes in the long run will be much better off, and like your self-awareness is so important, and like unfortunately, like, your coach's self-awareness didn't come till later on, but if all coaches were self-aware from the start, a lot of these athletes wouldn't have these experiences.
I think over time this will change. Like,
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
all these, I mean, all
And
of us.
I think
our
starting this
generation-
conversation, like what we're doing right now, that produces change, and it needs to be more like people need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to change.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we all realize as we're talking, like, things that happened to us that we didn't even realize. And I think a lot of athletes are starting to realize, like, I was abused and had no idea. And so now they're going into coaching and being like, I don't want to be that person. But they might not necessarily even realize how not to be that person.
Exactly.
Because
Well, and I
they
think-
learn from their coach.
And like so many coaches, they just want so badly for you to succeed. They want you to be the best you can be.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
at least for me, I told my divers this from the start, and the parents, I said, I want them to be as good as they want to be.
yes.
I want to push them as much as they want to be pushed. Because some people, like, you push them too hard and they break down.
Yeah.
And like, everybody's different, and I need to learn from each person how you can best be pushed. Like, nobody should have the same coaching philosophy for every athlete.
No.
It
That's
has
important.
to be different for every individual athlete.
Yeah.
because
And the
everyone
athlete
is
needs
different.
to be able to communicate,
Yeah.
like, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or this really helped me. Can you do that more often?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I talked to my roommate, Izzy. She was saying how, like, she needs someone to just tell her, like, you do this dive now. Because, like, and I work the same way. Like, when people are like, you choose when to do it, I'm like, that gives me too much anxiety. That's too much leeway. Like, sometimes I just need someone to be like,
For me,
hey,
it's
you gotta
That's
go.
so, for me,
it's great.
that's so different for me, which
Yeah.
is funny to hear you say that. Like, if a coach tells me to do a dive and I know I'm not ready, I'm gonna do it because they're telling me to do it.
Yeah.
But
But I
what
don't
helps
feel
me
ready.
the most, like anytime someone has said we're not doing this until you're ready, especially coming back into the sport, like I'm diving now,
Yeah.
and John hasn't pushed me.
Yes.
Every time I do something new, it's because I'm asking to.
Yes.
And it's such a different experience.
actually,
like
I like
I'm,
that.
I'm
Great. I
enjoying
love it.
diving more than I ever have before because I'm making the decisions of when to push myself.
Yes. Actually, I do take it back because, like, there are times at which sometimes I'm just like, they need to be, it's weird. It's like, I want someone to be like, hey, you're ready to do this. But I feel like it's up to me to be like, okay, I'm ready to do this now.
Right.
Like, I don't like someone being like, it's free flowing, you know, all the time. Like, I need a little bit of structure. But, like, I would
But
like
you
a
should
coach-
be able to say, I don't
Yes,
want to do
I
this
think
today.
there's I think there's a difference between like saying like, hey, you're ready to take this up, take it up when you feel ready, and being like, you need to take this up right now. Because like if someone's like, Skylar, do this today, like this is when you do 205, like I'd be terrified.
Yeah.
But if they're like, you are ready to do 205, please tell me when you feel like confident enough. I'm like that was what it was the other day. Like last week I was like, you know what? I feel ready to do this. And I went up and it was the best I've ever done a dive because I went up knowing I was ready.
Yeah. When I started learning my 10-meter list, I honestly believe I was not ready for any of my dives. I don't think I was. I was 13 when I learned my first dive. Technically, you're not supposed to be on 10-meter when
No.
you're 13. And I was so scared of disappointing my coach that I made a rule with myself. As soon as I learned front 3.5 on 10-meter, from here on out, I say 1, 2, 3, go. I don't care what happens to me.
Yeah. Which
And
is
it got to that point, like I'd be on 10-meter and I would be telling myself like, I don't know if I'm gonna be okay, but I have to go.
yeah, exactly.
I started doing that too.
Yeah. And from that point on, I never balked on a dive. I never didn't do something. And that made me feel good about myself, and that shouldn't have made me feel good about
No,
myself. I
exactly.
should feel good about myself by my ability to know what I need and be able to stick up for myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't. That made me feel weak.
Yeah.
it's like, oh, don't balk or you're a terrible person because you balked at a meet. And it's like
sometimes it's dangerous, you know?
It's so dangerous. And in the moment, you're like, I don't want to disappoint my coach.
That's what it is.
Because it's going to be, you know, when I come home, are they going to be mad at me? Am I going to be punished? Am I going to be, you know, asked to do this dive 100 times until I can do it without balking? Like, so you start to push things that make it the sport even more dangerous than it already is.
Right.
It's already scary. It's already hard.
When I was learning my list one Friday, my coach came up to me and said, on Monday we're doing this dive. And I was shocked that he told me I was doing it. It was back 3.5, and I was like, I'm not ready for that. Why are we doing that? Like, I can't even spot a back 2.5. Like, why are we doing this? But he said, we're doing this dive on Monday. That weekend, I went on, like, a birthday trip with my friends, and I was so distant on that trip because I knew that on Monday I was going to get on 10 meter and say 1, 2, 3, go, and I was going to go regardless of what happened.
Yeah.
And I knew that after Monday I could be seriously hurt.
Yeah.
So I knew I was just facing an injury.
Yeah.
Like, I was facing pain. Every time I get up there, it's like, I might get hurt. Let's go.
Yeah. And then when you do it right and you don't get hurt, then you're like, oh, well, see, I'm more capable than I realized.
Yes.
And you're always told, like, oh, your body can do 40% more than it thinks it can. And so, I mean, this is part of how I got rhabdo actually last year is I was like, oh, my body can do 40% more than what I think I can.
Yeah.
And so I got to 60 pull-ups and I was like, well, that's only 40 more pull-ups. I can do that.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I was barely making it up. I was having to jump to make it up, which I should have known I need to stop now.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I was like, I have 40% more in me.
Yeah.
And so
that's
I continued.
Like coaching practices have instilled that mindset into you so you live with that for the rest of your life.
Right.
Where it's like, I'm not good enough or I can do more and I can push myself, and you start learning to listen to your body, you know? And people who aren't athletes or haven't been in athletics don't understand that.
And chances are your 40% more as an athlete is really not 40% more because you've learned to shut off that brain.
Exactly.
Yep. And so you probably really only have maybe 10%.
Yes. If that, you know?
Yeah.
For real.
When you say you're done, your body's done.
Yeah.
Your brain's done.
Yeah.
And that's so hard to learn. Like, I'm there now where, like, obviously I got a concussion a few weeks ago and I'm trying to get back into diving, and it's such a different experience for me right now of just not pushing myself.
Yes. I know. I'm really proud of you, by the way, for that. Because I was like, do not do a flip. I was like, careful.
I was yelling at her.
I know. She was like, I bounced on the trampoline. I was like, no.
Well, and for the first time ever, I've told my coach, like, I'm going to try this today. If I feel any symptoms, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting out. And it like, the
and
last...
you didn't argue with it.
No, and the last 2 months is the first time ever in my life that I've gotten out of the water before practice is over and said, I think I need to be done for the day.
Yeah.
It's the first time ever. I hurt my back a few weeks ago. I did a front flip on the mat and my back tweaked, and it's the first time in my life that I didn't push through it, and I went up to him and said, I think I need to be done for the day. And I took a few days off.
And then you felt better, right?
And I felt better.
And
then
it
got better.
Exactly.
And then I could go again.
Yeah. Crazy how that works, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. But, yeah, I have learned so much. And I think one of the most important things that people don't realize and that I want to end with is this idea of, like, people think emotional abuse is not abuse. That I literally was talking to one of my teammates, and I was talking about how I was doing this podcast, and he's like, well, emotional abuse isn't actually abuse. And I looked at him, I was like, he's probably experienced so much that he doesn't think that anymore, because they look at it and they're like, it's only abuse if it's physical, it's only abuse if it's sexual. But like, emotional abuse is so heavily prevalent in athletics that you think that's how you should be treated. And you're like, that's not abuse, that's just how I should be treated. Right, exactly. And
I don't even know what to say to that.
I know. I was just like shocked.
Well, and I feel like I felt the same way, and I didn't realize until I went to therapy and talked to someone who wasn't an athlete and told her my experiences, and she was just in disbelief.
Yeah.
And I was confused about why she was so, like, taken aback by my experiences. Like, I didn't understand it. Like, I knew I needed therapy about, like, these big things, and I learned in therapy how much I had to heal from. I didn't know.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, I have anxiety. And then it trickles down and you're like, oh my goodness, all of this was not okay. but
yeah, like I remember it was like when I had first
athletes have PTSD and don't
Oh,
even
yeah.
realize it.
when I had first started therapy, my coach had me like write out a timeline, just events in my life. And until I sat down and started doing it, my timeline was about 10 pages long.
Yeah.
And until I sat down and started doing it, I didn't realize all of these things that I had to put on there.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I have learned like so much today, and I think it's just like even just talking about it and like raising awareness is the first step in this, and then going from there is creating a system in which coaches are held accountable and athletes have someone to reach out to, and then there's less stigmatism around mental health issues and around people communicating how they feel, because that is like the basis of just being human. It's like you have to communicate. We all have to, like, that's how we, get things out.
That's how we function.
It's how we function, and it's like you can't be a healthy person, you can't have a healthy mind, body, everything, unless you're communicating this.
Right. And I feel like that communication starts with self-awareness of knowing what you have to communicate. And, like, it's just so ingrained to not be self-aware.
Yeah.
That needs to change.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
I agree.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I will end it here.